Welcome to Legal Beagle.
Welcome to Legal Beagle, featuring attorney Kristina Lyke, founder of Lyke Law PLLC. Kristina provides expert legal insights and practical advice for legal situations. I'm Zofia Morales, and today's episode is The Faith Factor: How Morals, Values, and Justice Shape a Strong Legal Defense. Welcome back, Kristina. I'm so happy to be back with you today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, and I am very happy to be here myself.
All right. So let's delve into an area that you don't hear from most lawyers about, and that's your faith. How does that shape the way you advocate for your clients and make decisions as a lawyer?
This is a different kind of subject area, but my faith is very strong. I received my faith through my mom. She taught me my faith. So I always say that I received my First Amendment from my mom and the Second Amendment from my dad, because my dad was a gun dealer growing up.
Oh, there you go.
I had both of them, and I became an attorney at years later. But so my mom taught me my faith, as I stated earlier. But what happened is that my mom always asked me if something was wrong with my life, or something I was having. I couldn't find my keys, or even today. I mean, my mom, bless her heart, she's 81. Actually, I think she just turned 82, but they're like my best friends. But anyway, my mom actually says, did you pray about that, Kristina? And that just annoyed me, because I'm thinking, well, a quick prayer isn't going to get me, my keys right now. Well, I'll tell you, I can tell when I don't pray in the morning before I go to work. I feel like I am not putting my best foot forward. And I always pray that I have the wisdom of Solomon, so that I can actually do very well for my clients and make sure that I make wise decisions and help them make wise decisions for them, because I have their lives in my hands, and I want to make sure that we do whatever we can to make sure that they can move forward. And, whenever they can come into a lawyer's office and they feel a little bit better coming out, I believe that we've done a good job that day. So, yeah, prayer is a wonderful thing. And I'll tell you, I've won a lot of cases with a real quick prayer.
And I'll tell you what, it works for the keys too. I've used it that way.
Yeah, me too.
So in the legal system, especially one that feels broken, how do you keep your moral compass intact?
That's a really good question. By prayer. And sometimes I always look at it this way. My definition of integrity is this: doing what's right, no matter what the cost is. And sometimes that cost can be a huge cost, because you may lose friends. You may lose some colleague friends that, had a lot of respect for you. But a lot of the attorneys that know me out in the field of, divorce, custody, criminal, they respect that of my faith. They also understand too that I'll pray for them. And I've had some that actually do not even believe in God. They'll call me up and ask me, hey, I think I have something going on. Can you just, do what you do? Can you pray? And so I'll pray for them. But it's different, because it is not a big thing in as a lawyer to go and say, hey, guess what? I'm a Christian, and come see me. A lot of people try to devalue that, but you have to be brave out there, and I'm not ashamed. I am a Christian, and I take that to heart. So, and I think that it helps me with my morals, because you have to look yourself in the mirror every day, and I have to think, what are people going to think of me if I did this? And also, ethics are a big equation of being a lawyer. And we always get the jokes, and some of them are pretty funny, but you have to remember, you got to keep your ethics. And so you have to be grounded on that. And that doesn't mean that I don't cuss once in a while. I mean, shoot, the framers of the Constitution went and cussed. And that doesn't mean that you're not a Christian, or I'm not walking that way, or anything of that nature. But I believe that faith is a big part of where I'm at and how I do in life.
Absolutely. And there are moments where you just need to call a spade a spade. I mean,
Right.
even Jesus had his moments. So
He did get angry.
he did get angry. Absolutely. So what are some of the ways you bring compassion into a courtroom setting without compromising your strength and your vigorous defense of your client?
That's a very good question. Sometimes when you're sitting in or standing in front of a judge, it depends on what. If we're like, let's for instance, I'm in front of the judge and I'm doing an allocution, which is a sentencing, and you can see the values of the person. I don't care who you are. There's something that has to be good about that person. And sometimes it's hard to find that, and you have to point that out to the judge, but there's got to be something, and you point that out to the person because and you want to tell their life story. And sometimes, I always ask, of course, hey, is there if I put my hand on your shoulder to just to let the judge know that I care about you and what happens in the situation. And the person's usually, yeah, that's fine. That's like that, whatever, and plus, they're shaking like a leaf a lot of times when they're up there at the podium, and it kind of gives them that courage. So when they can actually say something, also when people testify too, I try to make sure that I lean in and try to ask them a question softly, and try to get their story out, and make sure that it's like kind of like a not a theatric performance or anything, but it's I want them to be soft spoken to let them know that it's okay to tell your side of the story, and that's what we're here to for is your facts of your case. So that's why I think it's very important to have that compassion for your clients. But also, I said in a different segment that you also have to separate yourself, and that's a fine line to do that because some attorneys cannot do that. And how I separate myself is I have to watch a comedy show like Everyone Loves Raymond at night,
There you go.
something of that nature. A little Law and Order too sometimes.
Just because.
I'm waiting for Olivia to get with Stabler soon.
uh, I think we've all waited for that for a very long time, and I
I
think
know.
I think writers have made a decision that we're not going to approve of.
I think I agree with you on that.
So, have you ever faced pushback for bringing your faith or values or compassion into your legal work?
Yes, I did. I used a verse. It was a sentencing, and I used a verse during the sentencing, and it was about it was a about a it was a criminal case, and it was about a boyfriend and a woman, and they were having an extramarital affair. And this man, he's a good person. So anyway, he used a gun, and during that sentencing, I used a verse that was about, what love is. Love is kind. Love is, blind. But or sorry, love is
Patient,
kind.
all of
Love is
that. Yeah.
patient. And then I said, but you know what, Your Honor, love is also blind. And so I went on to that allocution about how it was in the heat of the moment that he tried to do that at that time period and didn't try. He wasn't trying to harm anybody, but he did what he did was wrong. But I was trying to give him what the facts of the case were. So I used that, and I used that verse. But one of the things that one of the attorneys said is, you shouldn't be doing that. You can get in trouble for that. Some judges are not going to like that. And I said to that individual, I said, well, that's my First Amendment right. And so never had a judge that has actually said anything about it. And there's a lot of judges that actually appreciate, who I am, and have respect for that, and consider that a good thing.
Excellent. And how do you talk to clients about doing the right thing, even in the face of a very uncertain outcome, or maybe what appears to be a massively negative outcome?
Well, I try to give them little stories about, something that, happened maybe perhaps like in one of my settings, like it might be something kind of goofy that happened like during I was planning my wedding, and there was something that happened with a family member, and I had the choice of actually doing the wrong thing or doing the right thing. And I chose to do the right thing because I had to pray about it, and it wasn't easy. But I tried to give that some advice like that, and I tried to give them like a hypothetical too. And I also explained to them too that it is hard and difficult to do the right thing, but you might not get rewarded right now for that, but judges do look at that, and they look at what have you done throughout the case. And the more community activities, like if we're talking about criminal community activities or things that they do for the community, that helps them to show what a better person they are. If it's in a divorce, their attitude during the divorce, how they treat the opposing counsel, how they treat their own attorney, things of that nature, and whether or not they're stealing, not stealing, but basically, well, it is kind of stealing,
Well,
taking the
hiding.
marital
Yeah.
property away. And my client calls it stealing, but they're taking it and trying to hide it. And I said, if you just look at the behavior that you're doing and think about it, what would the judge think about this? That kind of puts it in perspective. And I said, I want the best result for you. And sometimes it is difficult to do the right thing.
This is very true. So, what advice do you have for attorneys or clients who want to bring a more values based advocacy into their lives?
My advice would be this is that be yourself, because I think that your faith, when you bring your faith into the practice, now, not everybody wants to hear that. Not everybody wants to have you preaching at them or anything of that nature. But I'll tell you what, when I go to church on Sunday, I can tell a difference. And I told my husband, I said, "Now, aren't I acting a little bit better this week because we went to church?" And he'll be like, "Yes, I think we need to go to church every week." So, but I try to explain that it does help when you go and place your faith in the cases too. But for instance, when clients come into my office and they use, oh my, God, or if they use, JC or something, or use, the Lord's name in vain, I don't care if you cuss in my office. I really don't, unless you cuss at my secretaries or my staff. You're not going to do that. But I don't care about that because I understand it's emotion. But when you use God's name in vain, I don't tolerate that, and I ask them not to do that. And usually they respect that quite a bit, and I appreciate that. And they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I said, "You can use any other word but that." And usually they're very respectful on that. So, and a lot of times too, I've helped, some of the clients that if they wanted to get free counseling, I directed them to a church. One time there was a marriage and it was not even valid. And
Mm.
they were married for 50 years and they wanted to celebrate it. And they found out they weren't really married because the divorce was handed on the desk of the judge. And the judge had 2 days to sign it. And it was in a different state. So he got married the day before it was signed. So their marriage was not even valid. So what
Oh
I had to do,
no.
yeah, and so what I did is I asked a pastor to come, and these people were elderly, and they wanted to have this huge 50th anniversary, right? And she got really sick. So what I did is I got a pastor to come in, hired him, and he performed the ceremony, and it was called a secret of marriage. And I've never done one of those before. It was like probably my 8th or ninth year of practice, and you learned a lot. And we got them married, and they could celebrate their 50th year of marriage.
That's excellent. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this insight into how your faith has formed your practice.
Oh, my pleasure. And we actually are going to see a special guest speaker next week. It's going to be at the Lincoln dinner in Livingston County. If anyone wants to go to that, but it's Coach Joe, and it was Average Joe the movie, and
Yeah.
he was praying on the field and he was fired. And that case is huge because it actually overturned the Lemon versus Kurtzman case with the Supreme Court. And it was a 6-3 decision. And so that really helped the First Amendment. So I'm really looking forward to actually meeting this man. And what I would like to do is actually pull the Supreme Court case out and have him sign it and see if we can
Cool.
raffle it off and keep one too for ourselves as well. But what an honor, because you don't get to meet a lot of individuals that the Supreme Court actually affected their life that well. And plus, that's a huge factor in my life. One of the reasons why I became an attorney was because of the First and the Second Amendment. So I talk a lot about that. I actually go to public speaking engagements and talk about the First Amendment and what is so special about the First Amendment. So I always tell my mom, I may not be able to pray, Mom, that, out in public, they may not ask me to pray. I'm not the missionary that you wanted, maybe, but she's happy with what she got.
Absolutely. Well, and I've always found that preaching doesn't get you far, but walking the walk is what really makes a difference and what
Absolutely.
people notice.
Right.
Yes. And thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Legal Beagle with attorney Kristina Lyke. To contact Kristina, visit LykeLaw.com and be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review so others can find this valuable information.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.